What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Prop Match, your trusted resource for all things prop related. Today, we're joined by Siju Daniel, who is the Chief Commercial Officer, who's agreed to share his knowledge, his time, and his experience in the prop trading world, in which he started with his broker-backed firm. And we're excited to hear all about it. So, Siju, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Emmanuel, very much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to a really fun and interactive chat with you.
Now, before we get into today's video, just want to let you know that we're doing a giveaway sponsored by ATFunded, and we're going to be giving away 3 5K accounts. So make sure you stay tuned to find the instructions on exactly how to enter today's giveaway. Awesome. And for those who are obviously seeing you for the first time, Siju, you want to give us a little bit about your background and a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I've been in the industry for going over 20 years now. I started in the United States with a company called FXCM many moons ago. I had the opportunity to be part of their global development team. And so in 2007, work brought me out to Hong Kong, where I was part of the team over there that built out our Asia Pacific business. And I was able to see, not only the US or the North American aspect of this business, but have a much deeper understanding of the Far East and that part of the world. And over the years, I focused not only on the retail side of the business, but also on the institutional side of the business, which also brought me to places like the UK and Dubai and so many other amazing and interesting places. So over my career, I've had the great pleasure of working across the globe, both in the retail part of the business as well as the institutional. Just a couple of years ago, I came across this prop trading phenomenon, and I am still relatively new to it, but we're really excited with our broker-backed prop, ATFunded, and we're learning as we go. So I've had a very interesting growth and development. I believe, our background and my background specifically on the broker side helps us. But like I said, to be in an industry for 20 plus years and still be able to learn and grow every single day is a blessing. And that's what I'm able to do by working with the likes of yourselves and industries like this.
That's amazing. And I can imagine, like you said, having 20 plus years experience, it's almost humbling in the sense that you could still, like you said, learn a lot of things. I think that's amazing and keeps the career and the field that you're in fresh and exciting, I bet.
Absolutely. Like I said, if you're not learning, you're dying, right? And I think that's part of the sort of the ethos of ATFX. I've been with ATFX as their chief commercial officer for a little under a year now, and I joined them specifically because they are a fast-growing, very ambitious. Today, probably one of the top 3 or 5 in terms of MT4, MT5 volume, and we've got big global ambitions to be number one. And it is humbling because our bread and butter business is something that we're very familiar with. We're expanding geographically, but to be able to enter a different segment like prop, which is of course related, but something that we are the relative newbies in, and so to set very ambitious goals for ourselves where, on the broker side of the business, our goal is to be number one. And we understand that we're the new player on the block of the prop space, but hey, why not have, big sort of audacious goals on the prop side as well? And that's why, it keeps us excited, keeps us engaging, and to be able to work with, like I said, a diverse group of people.
Can you tell us a little bit more about ATFX and then what led to the creation of ATFunded?
Sure. So ATFX is a global FX CFD player. We're at this point, like I said, we're one of the largest. We've been in business since 2016, 17, approximately, I believe. Approximately 8, I believe, soon to be 9 global licenses. So from the UK, Australia, South Africa, Mauritius, most recently Hong Kong, and we have one that we will be announcing fairly quickly. We operate across 23 global offices, and what makes us unique is that we have a very wide geographical footprint. And what we've done is, we've localized all of these offices to the best of our ability. And that means, for example, if we want to go into a certain market, we don't just parachute someone in from head office and say, hey, head office and HQ knows how to do everything right. We go into the local market, we look at, what the competitive landscape looks like. We try to hire the best talent possible, and we provide them with the resources that they need to be able to grow a strong business for us in that specific country and in that specific market. So that's what excited me. By the time I showed up, these guys had already built a dominant position, and the leadership at ATFX, they have a singular goal and focus to be number one on the brokerage side. And what that means is, you're also looking into industries and segments that are related, right? It could be in the tech space, it could be in the onboarding space. And that's where, you're starting to see a lot of innovation, a lot of sort of just experiments taking place. And specifically for us on the funded side, ATFX had already been studying and doing their deep dive on the funded and prop side well before I showed up. And I think, as I called it a phenomenon earlier, right? And I think it's something that we watched from afar. We saw the amazing numbers that were coming out by obviously, today global brands like FTMO. And so it's one of those things where it became too big to ignore, right? And so after conducting a lot of due diligence on our part, the next step was, well, how do we get involved in this, right? And what are the USPs, the uniqueness that we would have as a broker backed? And what led to our involvement there was, we came across 2 things. One, when we got involved in the space in 24, we saw also the demise of a lot of prop shops, right? And so that told us that, there was a vacuum there of trust, of size, of credibility. And that's something that was part of our wheelhouse, being a globally licensed broker, having 8 licenses and understanding that part of the business very well, not to mention a strong balance sheet. So we saw, okay, in a vacuum where trust and credibility was being eroded, maybe there is an opportunity there for us. So that was part one. And part two was, we came across a good group of people who are from the prop space themselves, who've worked at some of the biggest shops. They came to us and they bring a collective experience of, I believe, even though the prop space has been around for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 8, 10 years, I guess, depending on who you speak to. But these are seasoned and skilled operators. And I think one of the things we do at ATFX very well is we know what we know, but more importantly, we know what we don't know. And so we were able to work with and bring some of these sort of industry experts on board. And the combination of their experience with, I would say, our strong points work out to be a really good combination and a perfect marriage, so to speak. So that gave us the confidence to enter this.
I love everything you said, especially about the trust and credibility in the vacuum there. Definitely something that's needed, which is, well, what sets, ATFunded, let's say, apart from, all the other competitors? Because as you're aware, it's a very rapidly growing industry and it's very competitive. To you, how would you say ATF separates itself from the competition?
Obviously, being broker backed, that's one differentiating factor immediately. And being broker backed means a couple different things, right? So you've got, I would say, the infrastructure in place to run such a large scale business like this, from the expertise on the risk side to potentially the expertise on compliance, should that be something that, we need to be aware of. But more so, what do we present that's unique? We have ATFunded Plus, right? And so as our clients go through the challenge phase and into the funded phase, we have this other opportunity that we have hundreds of thousands of clients, retail clients who are on the broker side, who are always looking for successful traders, right? And so for us, is an interesting proposition because we can go to our clients who are passing through all the challenges and get to the funded stage and beyond that and say, hey, listen, you can then join the ATFunded Plus program, right? Where we can now put you and your trading and your track record in front of a very wide audience, right? And it serves both purposes because now we have the ability to offer something, a value add, I would say, than from someone who is a traditional prop, right? Number one. Maybe they have ambitions of being some sort of managing a larger portfolio or something like that. So to be able to work with a broker who says, hey, listen, if you're successful and you're profitable and you have a good track record, I can now expose you to a database and a user base of clients that are hundreds of thousands strong. And I think that's a very, very unique proposition, not that obviously, certainly the prop only firms certainly cannot do. And even the broker backed ones may not be able to do, right?
Lovely stuff. It's exciting stuff. I'm excited to see all the stuff that unfolds. And I wanted to ask, ATFunded, being a new broker backed prop firm, education is really important to a lot of traders who are just beginning their journey, who are new to the whole space. What does ATF offer, or does ATF have plans to offer any educational resources that might assist traders in their journey as prop traders?
Absolutely. So the team at ATFunded, I believe, has already started to put out some educational content on the website. And like you said, I think that's going to be critical because you want longevity in your customers. You want them to be successful, right? And so we've been adding more and more content on our ATFunded page. I believe we're going to have a full course, full tutorial that's going to be all free of charge. So all of our customers can kind of go through it, click through it, learn and engage and use with it as they need it. And again, that's going to be more content that we're going to be developing on the ATFunded side as an add-on step, being broker backed. As I mentioned, we have 23 offices across the globe. And in many of those offices, we have analysts, market analysts that sit in those offices. So another unique value proposition and something that we're thinking about is also, hey, if you, of course, we may be receiving prop customers from 100 different countries. Unfortunately, we're not in every single one, but at least the ones that we are in, we can do an online to offline sort of component and say, hey, listen, if you're, for example, in South Africa, right? We have an ODP licensed entity there. We have a beautiful office in Cape Town. It's very easy for us to, work alongside our colleagues on the funded side and say, by the way, if you either are interested in a challenge or you buy a challenge, we're going to be hosting a series of events in our physical office. Come to that office, listen to our analysts speak, let us arm you with the education, the resources, the background that you need to be able to navigate this successfully. So I would say we're looking at it already from an online component in terms of the content, but we're already thinking about how can we also add an offline component, and that makes it even more unique because I believe on top of that, it also adds to a sense of community, right? So it's one thing to delve into something new and kind of be on your own. And maybe, again, you can do that online as well. But to be able to physically meet with a bunch of other people who are kind of going through similar challenges, sit there, talk, learn from each other, and then build a community around that is, again, something that's also fantastic and something that we'd be very interested in looking to do.
I agree. Again, sounds phenomenal. And again, these are things that I believe are just pushing things in the right direction. I think they're needed. And I think these will help a lot of traders who don't have the right guidance to really have a structure to follow, which, like you said, if your goal is to have traders succeed, I believe that's the right way to go about it. What are some of the most common mistakes that traders are making that lead to their downfalls or inability to succeed in the trading world?
So even within a short period of time on the prop side, I would say that it's no different than what we see on the brokerage side, right? And like I said, I've been in this business for over 20 years, and risk management is the number one thing. It's absolutely the number one thing, in terms of, how do they deploy their capital? How are they using their leverage effectively? How often are they trading? What are their trading times? And so risk management is the number one thing. And again, it might be boring. And I've done many courses, and I've attended a lot of seminars where even the presenters will talk about and say, listen, this is really the fundamentals of it, the basics of it. But even on the prop side, we're seeing the very same things, right? So over trading, over leveraging, hold times being too short. All of these things are the same thing that we're seeing on the broker side, and for the most part we see also on the prop side. These are the biggest pitfalls and downfalls that we see.
Got you. Yeah, you're not the first to say that. I hear that from a lot of different broker-backed firms. Are there anything, other key, habits or attributes that you've noticed from successful traders that set them apart from the unsuccessful ones?
Patience. Patience and sticking to your plan, right? And what I've seen, like I said, what I see on the broker side, I'm starting to see on the prop side. And so, for example, of course, leverage is a key factor, but on average, unless you're a algorithmic trader and you have some sort of high frequency strategy, generally speaking, looking at the whole time of your positions, meaning when I see shorter term trades, I tend to see, a downward sort of trajectory in terms of profitability. So I think for those who have a trading plan, to stick with that and kind of see the trade fully realized, right? Now, the flips, and then what I mean by that is, again, over trading, not trading, like waiting for your positions to get into the territory that they need to be. Now, the flip side of that is also, I've seen certainly traders hold on to losing trades for far too long, right? So you start off as a short-term or medium-term swing trader, and all of a sudden, when the position is not going your way, you're a macro fundamental trader. So that's the other end of the coin, I would say, or the alternative side of that. But in general, like I said, it's the patience that we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most successful traders that I saw on the brokerage side, I've seen them go in, they have their risk sort of management on a trade basis. They know their entry, they know their exit, and they know where their take profit and their limits are, and they stick to that. Yeah. And again, because when they go in, knowing when they're going to go out, knowing what the exit is going to look like when they enter the trade, and having the patience to kind of see that through, I've seen that be a big determinant of success, because it's the ones who all of a sudden feel like, okay, you know what, maybe I need to get out now, I need to take some profits off the table, et cetera, et cetera. Again, they may have missed out on much bigger moves. So same on the broker side as well as what I'm seeing on the prop side. Those who go in with the discipline, with patience, and with a trading plan. And again, if you've already gone in, analyzed it on a trade by trade basis, you know that if the trade doesn't work out and if it hits your stops, you're fine. You've already built that in. And so things like that, like I said, the behaviors aren't that different. It does really come back to the basics.
Very interesting stuff. And so I want to ask you now, just out of curiosity, have you noticed a correlation between, let's say, successful, consistent traders and the RR that they aim for? I know not everybody looks into those metrics, but like some people like to risk, 1 for 1, some like to risk 1 for 2, and some like to go for the 1 to 8 and 1 to 10s. Have you noticed any correlation or anything about that type of trading stat at all?
I have that historically from the brokerage side of the business. What do they say? The average trader or the greatest trader can be slightly better than maybe a coin toss. And I'm talking about strategies that are other than, for example, like a specific ARB strategy where you're looking at differential in prices or something like that, but on a directional basis. Assuming that at best you're going to be right slightly better than 50% of the time, you want to make sure your risk reward ratio should be at least 2 to 1. And that gives you the ability to obviously have a series of losing trades and still be able to have that longevity so that when the winning trade happens, you're able to overcome that. So generally speaking, I would say as a rule of thumb, I would use that. Yeah. But again, that's a back of the envelope calculation, as we say.
Gotcha.
Right? Not a deep sort of statistical analysis.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's appreciated. If you can help me kind of tie this together, if there was some sort of blueprint or some steps you could outline as to what a trader should follow to succeed, whether it's prop trading, trading in general, if you could, what would that look like for you?
Sure. I think invest in looking at it like an education, and nothing was built overnight. So I think those who come across some sort of advert or something on Instagram that says, hey, live the life of a millionaire trader, those don't work. Putting time and effort into it. If I can sort of remember one of the more successful traders I've seen on the brokerage side, I remember him telling me, he looked at it like he was paying the market tuition, and he went in and he made sure that he did as much research as he could. He learned as much as he could. He started out with an account with an amount in risk capital that he was comfortable losing, knowing that wasn't going to make a big impact on his lifestyle. And then again, investing into education, investing into continuous training, and over time he was successful. And so he's a good analogy for, I would say, both the brokerage and the prop space, right? So a lot of brokers, including ourselves, we have a lot of resources. Take advantage of that. Obviously, be patient, get as much knowledge and information as possible. So it's something that if you approach it from a perspective of, this is something that I'm committed to, this is something that I'm going to work on continuously, I'm going to give myself time to get good at it, then your chances for success are higher versus the ones who say, hey, I've heard of some pipe dream. I saw someone, an influencer, who said, hey, I can make $1 million and trade from the beach. Unfortunately, those are the stories where dreams are shattered. So it literally is back to the basics. So yeah, the blueprint for what looks, the blueprint for what a successful trader looks like, again, based on our experience, is just that. Those who put time and experience into it, invest into themselves, invest into knowledge, and again, give themselves the time to be successful, just like anything else. I think the blueprint is not that different.
No, I agree again. And I love the things you mentioned about, I love what you said about the successful trader from the brokerage side who looked at it like he was paying the market tuition. You said it earlier about the psychology. The way you look at things and your perspective really shapes the way you behave. And I think having a healthy outlook and expectancy of how this trading game really should be approached, I think really helps you start off on the right foot. Like you mentioned earlier, thinking you're going to be trading off of a beach and making millions of dollars is it's going to skew your experience, I mean, and your perception and stuff. So I think that's very important. And I wanted to ask, you mentioned a successful trader from the brokerage side. So far in your experience, is there any success stories you can share from the funded side in terms of traders who have been successful and what you've noticed with them as well?
We've had, like I said, we're a few months into this and we're starting to see those pass through the challenges and get to the funded. But we had one or two cases where, again, it was exactly, playbook or a blueprint of what I described. They were very patient and persistent through the challenge side. And obviously the prop side is a little bit different than the broker side because you've got built-in rules, right? So on the broker side, if it's your account, you can do whatever you want. So with the exception of a margin call where you're liquidated, whereas on the prop side, way before that, you've got so many rules built in from news trading and, how far you are away from the market and so on and so forth. So I think that's an even better experience because you're going in with some hard-coded rules, which are almost formulating what you should be doing as a trader. So on our side, like I said, we've had a handful of customers now pass through on your challenge side. We've had, I believe, one or two customers who went through onto the funded side, were able to withdraw some funds, which we were really excited to see. And we made a big fuss about it on our socials about it. But to the one that was successful, again, his what he was very consistent. What he did on the challenge side, he continued to do on the funded side. And speaking to some in the industry, we've also learned that what some do on the challenge side, when they get to the funded side, they change a little bit because, like you said, now they're shooting for the fences because, hey, I'm able to capture 80% of that P&L, and why not shoot for the fences? So the customer of ours who was successful, he was very consistent, persistent throughout, very good risk management, longer hold times. He's been good so far, and we're hoping that he continues to succeed because, again, he's a good advertisement for us as to why, what we're offering in terms of rules that don't change on you overnight, the consistency, the ability to pay out. We want to see more successful traders come out because we want to obviously demonstrate to the prop industry that, we're in this for the long game, and we want to see successful traders.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned that about the trader sticking it out and just being consistent on both sides, because just like you mentioned, for some reason, when the funded stage comes, everybody just starts to completely change, like highly affects the way you perform. So excellent point there. What aspiring traders should look for when in terms of building a successful career in trading?
I would say, have a long-term mindset, right? So anyone who's out there promising you overnight riches, question how they are making money themselves, right? So it's probably by selling you some course that tells you how to become rich overnight. They themselves haven't done it. So give yourself enough time and make sure that you have the risk capital available to go and try this venture. I think, when we talked about traits of a successful trader, I talked about a brokerage client that we had. And this particular client, he's always, and I tell his story often to anyone when we kind of talk about this. And this was a very interesting client where he was actually in law school when he came across trading.
Wow.
And he realized that he did not want to be a lawyer. And when I came across him, he told me a funny story where he said, listen, he was in law school, he got addicted to trading, but he realized that, okay, I need to have risk capital, right? He read the Market Wizard series by Schwager. And he was like, okay, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. But in that book, Schwager, I believe, interviewed someone, and there was a quote that said, do not even bother getting started unless you have like $50,000 or $100,000. I think something to that effect, right? And this particular client said, you know what? He was, I think, in year 2 of law school. He had another year to go. And he set this goal for himself where he said, you know what? I'm going to be a lawyer long enough for me to make enough risk capital that I can go and do this full time. And so he worked as a lawyer for 5 years. And he told me, because he had already committed to going through law school, he was nearly done. And then for the next 5 years, he committed to being a good lawyer. He committed to learning in all of his free time. And he committed to putting aside enough risk capital so that when the day came that he wanted to do this full time, it gave him enough time and enough budget to be able to do that, to see his success through. So long story short, it took him 5 years, right? So after law school, it took him another 5 years until he was able to save enough so that he could actually go into trading full time. And he told me for the next 2 years, I believe, his trading was break even, which by trading standards is still actually quite bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, but he said that was 2 years of no income coming in. Right. But again, he had budgeted properly. He had put money aside properly. And then I think by year 3 is when he started to show a little bit of income. And then, it was really by year 4 and 5 where he was able to start to replace some of his earnings as a lawyer with trading. And by the time I came across him, he had already been trading successfully for about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And he never looked back. But one of the things he told me was risk management is absolutely key. Number one. He's like, the other thing was control. The things that are within his control, right? So for example, for him as a trader, not knowing what his income looked like year over year, making sure he kept his fixed costs as low as possible, right? So he was like, that means living quite frugally and living below his means to ensure that, on the years where you don't make the amount of money, you can continue, right? Because the worst thing is you get in and you don't have a successful year, and then all of a sudden you go back to whatever it is that you thought you were doing. So that was his other thing. He's like, the things that are within our control, for him, it was his overhead, right? So he told me some funny stories of, just looking at his budget and planning for it and so on and so forth. And to the point where by the time I came across him, he was already a very, very successful trader, but his mindset actually never changed, right? And this was actually quite funny from his perspective. So he started with risk management and, controlling his overhead, which was very important. The other thing which was very interesting about him was he lived in a place that was not a financial center at all. And so you're speaking to me from Toronto, right? Ontario, you said, right? So
Correct.
he was from the Pacific Northwest. And he told me the thing is, and again, I'm not saying that's, that works well for everyone, but it worked well for him because he said he had no
Yeah.
distractions, right? So he was saying, the people that he deals with, most of the time, he has to explain what he does. They have no idea what he does.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
he was keeping his distractions to a minimum, right? So he can work on his craft, he can improve it. He has no, what they say, keeping up with the Joneses. He didn't have to worry about, oh wait, when am I going to make enough to buy my next Lambo or whatever the case was. He was like, he looked at his craft and he focused
Yeah.
entirely on his craft. And so he, like, again, I keep using him as an example because he, we know that's the minority, right? And there's a handful of guys that did it. They did it successfully, and
Mhm.
it worked really well. So to kind of go back to what you said, right? So if you're someone that's looking into this, how do you get started? Well, again, start with, and if you don't have the risk capital, start with free resources out there. There is an ocean of knowledge out there, right?
Mhm.
So between what's available on the broker space, what's available in the prop space, there's an ocean. We talked about on, for example, the broker side, demo accounts are still available, right? So go understands the mechanics of how the platforms work, understand how, maybe you can try out different strategies and so on and so forth. Even though I get it, the psychology may not be the same. Right. And then when you're ready to take the first step, you don't have to swing for the fences. So, we talk about on the prop side, we sell challenges for, $50. Sometimes, we talk about, to get something started, you just have to start. Right.
Absolutely.
And so I think what they call it, like analysis paralysis, where
Yeah.
someone decides they want to do something and they spend years or months studying it. And then you have like the Elon Musks of the world who just jump into it. Right.
Yeah.
And the right approach is somewhere in the middle. So I would say go and get free resources. They're widely available on the internet. And then when you feel confident enough to do something, again, maybe you start with a simulated version of it on a demo if it's on the broker side, right? But on the prop side, well, listen, there's a reason why we make those challenges at a very accessible level, as
Mhm.
little as $50 or less, right? It's never going to be a situation where everything's perfect and you're going to shoot for the fences and it's going to be a winner. Like, get your knowledge, get confident enough that you are willing to pull the trigger, try it out, and go back and learn from your mistakes. So I would say, in using that analogy of the client that I brought up
Yeah.
earlier, that's what worked for him, and he went on to have a successful, very successful career where he was a full-time trader.
So I want to ask you now, with your experience and from your background, what is ATFunded doing to manage their risk, both on like a firm level and, in terms of empowering traders to also manage their risk effectively?
Obviously, the prop space is very unique in terms of how you manage risk, and I've seen so much commentary and articles about it. And I think being part of a broker-backed prop is interesting because you have a risk team who has to handle that day in and day out for the broker side anyway, right?
Yeah.
Versus someone who's purely on the prop side who may need to go out and find external talent to be able to handle that. On the broker side, we're looking at a deep dive into analytics. We have the ability to capture all of the trades coming in. We're looking into analyzing it. How do we manage that? How do we hedge that properly? Because my understanding, what took place, in 24 was, a lot of the prop shops that went under, it was poor risk management on their side, right? And I think you need to be very careful of the ratios of, everyone knows what the pass rates are going to be. Everyone knows what the payout rates are going to be, and you need to manage that book accordingly. So on our side, what we're going through is we're going through an exercise of deep data analytics, being able to look into, what the patterns look like, and then building different risk models around that. So we know that, we're a relatively new and young prop, but hey, if we hit our goals and targets, we're going to start to see a lot more customers come through on the funded side, and we need to be able to
Mhm.
handle that effectively. So, we do have some exciting announcements that we'll probably be making in the coming months. Some things we can share publicly, some things that are obviously going to be proprietary, but I think the leg up that we have is that because we're managing several hundreds of billions of brokerage business today, that puts us in a unique position. But where we are today is, we're doing a deep dive into the analytics. We're looking at deep dive into different characteristics and building out our risk management around that. Because again, we expect to hit that fairly quickly and in short order. So that's what we're doing on the firm side. On the client side, obviously, the challenge side, the customers have rules built in, and that also does help on the firm side as well. It's also based on what we're seeing in terms of the characteristics and traits of a successful trader. So on top of the fact that we've already built in certain rules for trading, I would say the other angle is the education that we talked about already, giving them the tools and resources to be able to make informed decisions themselves, and then hoping that they're going to be able to take some of that away and deploy that into their own trading strategy. So that we control obviously a lot less. What we can simply control is the rules that we put in place. But like I said, our goal is to provide them with enough education resources that they can manage that risk better themselves. And one of the things we've been doing, and I think we'll be doing more so shortly, is more sort of case studies, so to speak, and highlighting, traits of a successful trader. And as we get more and more of these clients who go through the challenge phase and get to the funded page, we are going to be doing some interesting studies into, hey, here's some interesting statistics, in terms of what they trade, how they trade, what they trade. And so we want to use all those data analytics that we're seeing through customers that are coming through the challenge and funded side and continuously just posting that onto our funded and our prop side, so that anyone that comes in that takes a look, they'll see, hey, okay, great. Based on this, big body of information, this is what we've seen work. And again, you might be the anomaly that, obviously bucks the trend, but on the whole, you can go in and say, okay, maybe I should be focused on this instrument. Maybe my whole time should look like this. Maybe I should avoid this strategy. So again, what we want to do is we want to be very open book about it, right? We want to take all the knowledge and data that we're gleaming, and we want to put that very visibly on our funded site so that customers can benefit from that.
Awesome. I love that. That's so awesome. And so I would like you to walk us through now what a challenge looks like with ATFunded. Like, what does a standard prop challenge look like at ATFunded?
We have a two-part process. We have certain parameters that are built into it, and as long as you can pass those two challenges, then you get to the funded stage. Today, I would say it's very commonplace. It's plain vanilla. We have been debating doing more interesting things, so maybe a one challenge opportunity or one challenge product. I know some prop shops out there have a instant funded product as well. So we're looking at a lot of different options, and we're debating internally what's the best, and we're looking also at where do we see the biggest demand. So for us, like I said, to begin with, we went with the most plain vanilla out there, which is a two challenge process. Again, as we're getting into this industry, it's still a learning experience for us. We couldn't come out of the gate and be the most unique out there in terms of the challenge itself. Obviously, being broker backed and everything else that we offer is, we feel, quite unique. But we figured, let's just get out there, let's learn the business as we go. But again, we want to be innovative, we want to be interesting. So more to come on that front. But for today, it's a pretty typical two challenge process for us.
Awesome. If I want to switch gears here a little bit, if we can, I would like to talk a little bit about the industry now. You mentioned earlier, with being on the brokerage side with ATFX, a lot of licenses in different countries and things of that nature. In the prop space, regulation is kind of evolving a little bit, and everyone's anticipating some sort of, not hammer coming down per se, but some stricter regulations coming through. How is ATFunded adapting to these things and preparing itself to have that long-term sustainability if regulation does come into play?
Sure. I think that's a very interesting topic, right? Because you're going to get two viewpoints to that, right? Those who feel regulation is great because it'll add credibility, protect customers, so on and so forth. And then on the flip side, those who are worried that it may lead to overregulation. And I think there's truth to both sides. And so from our perspective, having experience work with 8 global regulators, soon to be 9, it tells us how we can prepare our business should that happen. And so one of the things that we're doing also is, again, outside of the fact that on the broker side, we have experience working with regulators, which is great. And we kind of know if the business has to be regulated, we have the infrastructure and the resources to be able to adjust that. What we would love to do, and I think several others sort of share and echo the same sentiment as we do, which is we'd love to work with regulators who are looking into the product. And with that, basically be able to provide some market references in terms of, hey, this is what's going on, this is what the industry looks like. And so that if regulation is built, it's built with that in mind. So I think regulation that's done well is when you have market participants, both on the regulatory side, as well as the user side, as well as the brokerage side, all of them coming together and explaining, hey, this is how the industry works. Here's the pain points. Here's the challenges that we see to it. And then regulation written that's driven to protect it, but then also allows it to grow. So I think the worst thing for everybody could be a knee-jerk reaction. A knee-jerk reaction where obviously there's some bad headlines attached to it. Obviously, those who are inside of the government who are looking to regulate things where if it harms the public, they want to regulate it right away, in which case it may lead to overregulation. So I think from our perspective, we're well-versed in regulation. We've engaged with some regulators who've said they're looking at it. And so we voluntarily approached them and said, hey, listen, this is what we know, even though our experience, meaning as a company, is a bit limited, but the team that's involved in running our prop business is very experienced. And so with those groups of people, we've certainly reached out to regulators who said they're interested in looking at it and provided as much information as possible. So we'd love to be part of that sort of study group. So you want to call that, or a feasibility group, or whatever the case is. Whether it's regulated or not, we don't know, right? I think the biggest thing that regulators sort of grapple with is it's not the client's money, right? At the end of the day, right? They're buying a challenge. They're not depositing funds necessarily. And time again, in checking with different regulators, that's usually where the conversation kind of comes to a stall, right? Like, should they regulate this? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that the fact that not only are you guys comfortable with it, it seems like you're proactive towards this. You're reaching out and seeking information and looking at what can be done almost ahead of time, which is just amazing.
Absolutely. I think, when you run a business, it's not so much, what happens today, but what you think may happen, months from now or years from now. And I think obviously the industry is massive. It's not a phenomenon, as I called it at the beginning of our chat, right? It's something when you look at, large players like FTMO, these guys are massive. The industry is quite big. It's quite scalable, and it's attracting a lot of attention. And I think that, we have to be aware of what may happen. And again, our wish is simply that if it goes down that direction, I think prudent regulation, sound regulation that allows for creativity and innovation would be fantastic. And that's something that we'd love to be part of.
Agreed. And so on that note, I want to know your thoughts now on the future of the prop trading industry, and how do you see the industry evolving in the coming years?
Again, don't have a crystal ball. But I think, in 24, from what I read and what I understood, we saw a lot of players getting washed out. And I think those who have survived and gone on through 25 understand some of the lessons they've learned from what happened before in terms of running the business properly, having the appropriate risk management, probably also having the right capitalization, right? And I think what I saw in 24 and 23 was that a lot of players who wanted to enter this space just saw it as a get-rich-quick scheme on the business side. Hey, listen, we can go in. There's, tons of traders, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in 25 and beyond, the players that are involved in the business are a little bit more sound. I'm also, to be honest, excited to see broker-backed props entering the space because you're also bringing in a little bit more expertise on the risk side in terms of the infrastructure side. So for us, if we did not think that this industry was viable, we would not have gotten involved. I think that's a bit of I would say, we're voting with our feet and with our money to show that we believe that there is a long-term viable business in the industry, right? If done well. So
Yeah.
we hope that it continues to grow. We hope, competition is a good thing. It leads to innovation. We're happy to see that. But we would not have entered this space if we didn't think that there was a medium to long-term opportunity. And we feel that there is. And like you said, the things that we just talked about earlier, things like compliance, the things like regulation, will only make it more mainstream. And that's something that's very positive for us. So
I want to ask you a little bit about, your thoughts on prop for match. So for example, what do you think about prop for match, and what do you think separates us or differentiates us from others?
Well, my team tells me that it was not easy to pass through and get ourselves onto your site, and that you guys did proper due diligence in terms of how it works and wanting details on even, I believe, the ownership structure on the broker side and how it all works. So that tells me that you guys do your due diligence, right? And so that was very, very refreshing. So I had to look through your site, and I'm seeing that, the reviews that you guys do are fit and proper. And what I mean by that is, I've seen sort of review type of sites that are pay to play, right? Which means, hey, if you take the right package, then, you'll move up in ranking. So I was very pleased to see that. And like I said, my team told me that it wasn't easy to kind of get through. We had to provide documentation and so on and so forth. So I think that adds a lot of credibility to what you guys are doing. So what I'm seeing on your site, it's, everything, the content there is well organized. I can see that, you're working with a lot of different prop firms. You guys are being unbiased in terms of your reviews, which is great to see. Because I think that's what the industry needs, right? You need an unbiased view in terms of what, the props are offering. You also want to see a real in-depth review in terms of, how these guys operate. So I think you guys are doing a great service to the industry and to the community, because you guys obviously are an authority source. People go to your website, they obviously take a lot of stock in what you guys are saying. And as someone who has to go through pins and hurdles to be on that side, I can attest to that. And I think it's a great service that you guys are doing in the industry. So I think that's what separates you guys.
Thank you. We really appreciate that feedback. Helps us a lot with in terms of how we want to grow and keep managing operations and improving, making it a good experience for both brokers and for the customers and clients who use the site. Finally, for the moment that you've been waiting for, here are the instructions on how you can enter the giveaway. The first thing you've got to do is like and subscribe to the channel. The second thing you've got to do is comment what you discovered or learned about ATFunded through this interview. As always, the winner of this giveaway will be announced in the next video, so stay tuned for that as well. With that being said, we hope you enjoy the rest of the interview. Siju, you are a wealth of knowledge. You've shared so much and poured so much into this interview. In case the people who have listened to the interview and watched this interview want to reach you, where can they find you? What are your social, what can they reach you if they want to connect with you?
So I'm really bad at this, but I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, Siju Daniel, ATFX, Chief Commercial Officer. Please feel free to add me there. I love engaging with people both on the industry side, user side. Obviously, at AT, we care a lot about the user. So listen, it doesn't have to be, hey, all the good things. I actually care more importantly when, if we're not doing a great job, if, the service level is not good or you're running into pain points. I care about that even more because we want to fix those issues. So certainly, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach me. Siju Daniel, ATFX. Happy to reach out, happy to engage people, and looking forward to it, matter of fact.
Awesome. Siju, I personally want to thank you, not just on behalf of Prop for Match, but for myself. Thank you so much for your time, sharing the wealth of knowledge that you did. And we look forward to more future interactions with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Emmanuel. It's been a pleasure. And again, look forward to maybe doing this again in the future.
Likewise, my friend. And to everybody else watching, thank you so much for watching this far. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for choosing Prop for Match. Take care, everybody.